to word, I'm quoting you the verse in the Torah. So what God told us is real opinion. My opinion is to serve my purpose. My purpose is that my children will follow my ways. As many places in the Torah it says, I wish that the Jews will be faithful and follow my laws. It's not so hard to keep it. It's not beyond the ocean. It's not above the sky.
Joseph, can I just interrupt you and say, I agree with everything you're saying.
I know. That part you should.
We have a saying, Christians have a saying, you're preaching to the choir.
No.
I am agreeing with the principle. And
I didn't say you don't. Actually, I started with the fact that you agree, but I'm getting to the point. This is all a preparation for the question. And I told you in advance that it's going to be long, so you cut me in the middle. And I told you that I'm going to give you as long as you need to respond to what I say. Even longer than mine.
You're asleep by then.
No, they're not. They're used to me already. Every average lecture of mine is 3 hours and up. So, yeah, even though sometimes they force me out by 10 o'clock, but that's okay. Now, I mean, I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. So the point that I'm trying to make is like this. God already told us that when He gives religion, He is not interested to give it to a person in a secret. It's going to defeat the purpose, not help the purpose. When Moses asked him, nobody believe in me, he said, I'm going to speak to you in front of them because I want them to believe in you. What makes us think that God changed His mind? God is not me and you that change the mind every 2 minutes. He already told us the way He's interested to give religion. Now, when a person asks you, how do you know the Jews received the Torah in Mount Sinai, and you yourself will answer it to your believers, you will tell them, because millions of Jews were standing and listening to God speaking to Moses. That's why we know for sure the Torah is from God. Do you have one witness, one person, not two? Even one, it's not enough. You always need minimum two. Please tell me, do you have two witnesses that can come and swear that they heard God coming to Mary in a dream and tell her whatever the prophecy that you mentioned before, or there is any two witnesses that God came to Muhammad and gave him the Quran? How is it possible that these people never thought to bring 2 or 3 or 5 witnesses to the story? Because everybody can say whatever you want. I had a dream. It's right away 50% out, forever. Tell me, please.
I can speak?
Please?
How long are you going to give me?
As long as you need.
You're not going to interrupt me.
That's I'm not promising.
we have to establish some better ground rules, I think.
Believe me, I'm trying. Please understand me.
And I agree with just about everything Yosef says. You know, I'll even go further. In Torah, it says that everything has to be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. And Jesus even said the same thing. He said, don't believe me if I'm just talking on my own, but believe me because of the evidences. And so I want to talk to you a little, just a little bit about the evidences. Has anybody here read David Klinghoffer's book, Why the Jews Rejected Jesus? Please get the book. He's an Orthodox Jew, and he's trying to justify why the Jews had every right in the world to reject Jesus. But on page 117 of that book, he admits some incredible supernatural signs, some verification. He said from the time of the crucifixion for the next 40 years until the destruction of the temple, and he's getting this from both Talmud and he's getting it also from Josephus. And he's saying these are things that Orthodox Jews believe. And he's saying in that 40-year period, from the crucifixion until the destruction of the temple in 70 A.D., 40 years later, there are all sorts of supernatural omens. Now, supernatural omens aren't good signs. They're really bad signs. And these are the signs that he talked about. He talked about a temple light that wouldn't stay lit. They kept on lighting it, and it kept on going out. The east gate of the temple wouldn't stay closed. It kept on opening. And if you know the prophet Ezekiel, you know that God left when he got angry with the Jewish nation. He left through that east gate. It was almost as if God was saying, I am out of here. Even more dramatic than that, Klinghoffer says that during those 40-year period, Throughout the entire land of Israel, people saw incredible spectacles in the sky, chariots and war cries and screaming and everything that suggested there was going to be a war. In other words, Klinghoffer agrees that there were all these supernatural signs coming from God warning about the impending destruction of the temple. Now, there are many forms of signs and evidences. The miracles that Jesus performed. You know, the Jewish people of Jesus' day never suggested that it was a sleight of hand by which he did these miracles. They all admitted that he did the miracles, but I think as Yosef was suggesting, that he did it by sorcery because he was in league with the devil. But if you'll read the New Testament accounts of the trial, they never brought that up against him as a charge. I don't even think they believed it. His signs were so incredible, and the good that he did, he healed everybody who came to him. He fed miraculously thousands of people on several occasions. He raised the dead. The Jewish people never took issue with that. They never claimed that he never did what the New Testament said he did. You don't even have that in the Talmud.
Please prove.
The Talmud doesn't offer any contradictory evidence. If these were fabrications that you find in the New Testament, the Talmud would be full of charges that these things weren't true. They never contested these things.
Okay,
And let me just finish. The very fact that the writers of the New Testament died martyrs' deaths, proclaiming to the end that what the things that they had written about was true, demonstrated that they didn't have any political motivation for getting together and lying about stealing Jesus' body away or these various miracles. In fact, when you read the New Testament accounts, I hope you will because it's very interesting. In fact, it's very much like Tanakh, because in Tanakh you read about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it lets all the ugly things about them hang out. When you read in the New Testament, you read about the disciples of Jesus. They were all meatheads. They were all foolish. They didn't even understand Jesus. But what that does is establish their authenticity. If they were willing to humble themselves so much in their own writing to show what jerks they were, it means that what they were about and what they wrote wasn't about trying to build themselves up.
by the way, you just answered one of my questions.
Good, finally.
And I tell you what, I'll be so happy. because I tell
You know what? I got
you,
something.
Please,
I got something in here.
Make sure our guests read them but I think what you just said. As a matter of fact, the point I wanted to present to you is that the reason that the Old Testament is full of so many mistakes and so many contradictions. Some of them
The Old Testament?
The New Testament is full of so many contradictions and so many mistakes is because the followers of Jesus, as you just said, were complete ignorant Jews. And he described his students who do not know Aleph Bet. And when you come to ignorant people that cannot be accepted to any yeshiva and ask them to falsify a book claimed to be from God, what do you expect? Every page has so many mistakes. Believe me, I have such a list here. I did not tell you maybe 10% of the things I wanted. Not that I thought that I'll be able to do everything in 2-3 hours, but I only...
Joseph, you got a big problem there. I'll tell you what your problem is.
What?
The problem is, if these disciples of Jesus, the ones who wrote the New Testament, and granted they didn't graduate from any yeshivas, and they were unlearned, but if they were so laughable, how is it that Christianity took off? How is it that even many of the Pharisees followed what these foolish people were teaching, unless they were convinced that something miraculous, unless they were convinced that the hand of God was involved?
I'm glad you said it. And from your words, I'm going to prove to you that Judaism is the only valid religion. From what you just said. When I come to a crowd and I try to convince them to be my students, and I start to gathering all the homeless people of the street, as he did, as you know, those ignorant that do not know anything anyway, and gather them to be his students and have himself a cult. When I come and this is my goal, what kind of religion are designed to these people? An easy religion to practice that everybody will jump and say, hey, we're with you, 100%, everything is allowed. Or I will design a religion that is so complicated, so difficult to keep. What will be an easier job for me? To come and tell them, for instance, one of the times the student told him, you told us that we're not allowed to violate any rules of the Torah. So how come you eat bread without washing your hands, without netilat yadayim? They asked him, those ignorant challenged him. So he said, he started to curse the rabbis. But in another page, as I mentioned before, he told his students, make sure you follow the instructions of the servants of Moshe, the sages, because they have it from generation to generation. So now, you just say that you must listen to the rabbis. Those are the ones who keep the Torah of Moses alive. And when the student asks you why you yourself don't listen to them, he started to curse them. Or when he told them that they're not allowed to violate the rules of the Sabbath, the next day student came and they wanted to cut wheat on the Sabbath. And he started to see that they're getting angry at him. So he told them, I allow you today to cut weeds. Why? I am the master of the Sabbath. Come on. You just say in the book of Matthew, as I mentioned before, no one is allowed to contradict one little law. And if he does, he is going to be cursed by God.
I'm sure they're...
just allow them to violate one of the most important rules of God.
See, I'm sure they would like to hear my explanation.
Please?
I'm sure they would.
You're cutting me in a nice way, I surrender.
I'll always try to be nice.
No problem.
What Jesus did, he never said you don't have to follow the law or the law is not important. And that's why Yosef is correct. He told the people to follow those in leadership. He did nothing. He wasn't a revolutionary. He did nothing to try to undermine the authority. But what he did do was point out that their interpretation of the law wasn't an accurate interpretation. You see, the religious leaders would criticize Jesus for healing on the Sabbath. And Jesus pointed out that they were hypocrites. Why? Because they did many things themselves on the Sabbath. They would water their animals. They would assist with the births of their animals. The priests would minister on the Sabbath. And so he understood correctly, and the religious Jews of the day should also have been able to understand that there are certain commandments that are more important than others, that it is justified if somebody is starving to death to pick food on the Sabbath day.
Wait, please. I used an example that is the worst sin in Judaism. Cutting weeds on the Sabbath is one of the 39 laws that we're not allowed to do on the Sabbath. You want the proof? I'll give you the proof.
Okay,
Let's see it.
I
give you the proof. Comes a person named Slofchad. You read in the Old Testament, Slofchad. He went on the first Sabbath after accepting the Torah, and he started to pull weeds, trash from the ground, and Moses didn't know what to do with him. He took him and put him in jail.